Chapter 11, the sports analogy. Think for a moment, what makes Kobe Bryant or Steph Curry work so hard? They train really hard. When they have to play their game, they play their best. And if you see them, practicing throwing the ball in the basket in practice, it's crazy. Like they push themselves so hard, so hard. What do you think? What makes them work so hard? What makes them, be the best at who they are? There's a lot of things that we can learn from sports that we can use at our work. And so that's this chapter. So how do you elicit peak performance, right? They're all working their best, their personal best. How are they doing it? Who is it money? No. At some point, they're not playing for money. They are playing for their personal best. That is a very critical learning from this entire chapter. What is it? What is that characteristic? So let's find out. First, we've seen so far that we now are in this age of knowledge workers. We cannot really monitor people by raw statistics. It's even hard to define how I'm going to measure your performance. We write pages and pages saying, hey, we're going to measure you on leadership, execution, craftsmanship. This is what we do. It's really good. It's the best that it can be. But think about this. Knowledge worker is very hard to measure. And everything that we've done so far, right, it has a lot of subjectivity, right? And none of these tactics, so far we've done like 10 chapters, but none of this works if your employee doesn't offer his or her best to your team. So all of this fails, right? So eliciting peak performance like we see in these sports players, that is the magic. And there are two potential gaps before you elicit peak performance. First is training gap, and second is motivation gap. Think about it for a moment. Your employee, if they're life dependent on some task that you want them to do, and if they could do it, then they don't have a training gap. But even if they're life dependent on it and they couldn't do that task, that means there is a training gap. Meaning the first thing you want to do as leaders is find out what kind of training gaps exist, train them for that. Second, once you fix the training gap, that means they can do the work. Will they do the work? That's where you find out that there is a motivation gap. And motivation is driven by needs. Needs drives up desires, and the drive is there. Saying, hey, I want to, let's say, the superficial need could be, I want to get promoted. It's the biggest need. That's the commonest need. Or I want to get paid more, right? So that is the motivation. And that's the need that they have. And so that need will get them to create the sense of drive and then create this inner motivation that gets them to work hard, right? So for each of these players as well, they would have had that need to make more money, to be recognized, to be known where they stand in their pack. But remember that training is the first gap, motivation is the second gap. Once you've motivated and trained your people, then you have the path to peak performance. Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? The lowest part of the pyramid, psychological needs, right? These are deep needs. Like if you don't even pay them well, like basics, forget about self-actualization. They have to be taken care of really well. If you want to compete in knowledge workers area, you have to pay your employees well. Look at what HDFC Bank has done in India too. And a lot of US companies do the same. They give their employees stock options. There's a drive that makes them entrepreneurs. There's a drive that makes them push themselves harder to give their personal best. So if you don't even take care of the psychological needs, if their employees constantly struggling for their basic needs like food, clothing, shelter, basic environment is like messed up, right? Like it's very hard to reach self-actualization. And then it's safety needs, like personal insurance. Do you give, things that cover the downside when it comes to health, property, the banks, is the country, not in a war zone, right? So psychological safety, these two pillars will get your employee to come to work reliably. That's like basic, right? If you want to get them to work their best, you want to get them to work. After that, you create this sense of belonging by companionship. Think about the people that you have hired. It's very important to create this sense of belonging, to create this sense of connection, that sense of friendship, that sense of trust. That is what keeps people at some point to go, to work hard, to contribute, to help each other out, right? So how do you create that sense of belonging is very, very important, right? So far these three pillars don't really get you to self, actualization. After that, you'll have people who are like motivated, they feel belong. Then the first thing they'll say, like, how do I get paid more? That's where the esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom, and all of that comes in. That's a big motivator. So if you don't have people that have these needs of esteem, then it's very hard to push them, right? Like if you pre-promote someone who's not really ready because their skill gap is missing, or if it's too premature in terms of promoting them, and they will lose a sense of drive as well. You have now undercut their performance because they'll have some sort of a midlife crisis. They'll be like, oh, now I'm promoted, but I don't think I was ready, right? And so, or now I'm promoted, what next? I have no idea. So their goals are like already achieved. So then the esteem drops. When the esteem drops, self actualization, forget about it. But self actualization comes after, like, someone's really promoted, and then they now have support to give their personal best. Then that's where self actualization comes. That's where you work hard beyond the time limits. Like these players, they don't have a 9 to 5 job. They work like crazy hard. And when they work crazy hard, they come up with pushing their outer boundaries just a little. They want to get just a little bit better. And when they continuously do that, they are relentless, right? Think about your kid. A lot of times they would not want to do their homework for like 20 minutes at a stretch, but when they want to, let's say, practice skateboard, they'll be at it. They'll be like not giving up. They will, like, fall. They make mistakes. They'll keep making mistakes. They'll keep improvising a little, and at some point they get it, and then they are like zooming past the skateboard, right? Same thing happens. You have to stay at it. Figure out what makes you tick. Figure out what is it that you really like to do, even if you don't get paid. Even if you don't get paid, what is it that you would do? That's where self-actualization comes in. So first two gets people to come to work. Third gets them to stay there. Fourth has some esteem of moving forward in life. Fifth is like peak performance, right? So that's the key learning in this chapter. How do you get and operate at this top two layers of esteem and self-actualization, right? We talked about promotion and pay. It's very important. You have to recognize your people. You have to be fair. If you're not fair, forget about it. People can see through you. Everyone can see through you. They have intuition and gut feeling. If you don't pay them well, you're not doing service. You remember, you're not even meeting the basics of the pyramid. You have to do that well to get esteem set up, and more so is to get them to actually get to their performance level. Everyone has such high potential. You want to get them past that, right? So esteem is important, with self-actualization is even better. Personal best, relentless drive. How can I keep getting better? And the way you do that is you set goals. You set output-oriented goals. A lot of time goals are set in such a way that I just know more, I done more research, but I don't really produce output based on that research. So set output-oriented goals. We've learned that. This book is very practical. It's not theoretical. So if you set goals that are 50% chance of making it, then you are eliciting that peak performance. And how do you do that? Right? First, fix the training gap, and then motivate your people. Because if they believe that, hey, I'm going to be the best software engineer out there because I am a software engineer, then dude, no one's going to stop them to be the best software engineer out there, right? Or I'm a boxer, I need to be a boxer because I am a boxer. dude, that's going to be the best boxer out there, right? So endow your work with characteristics of competitive sports, right? Like if you can think about that, if you can create that setup, think about like, people play games. I find it mindless, right? Like, why would you play games? But there's that deep desire to compete, to get better, to like, even in that virtual reality, you push the boundary. It is very powerful force. So your employee, if they become athletes and if they play those games to push that outer limits, then you've got something crazy good for your knowledge worker. So um, remember this one line: eliciting peak performance means going up against either somebody or something. Like that something could be a score that says, hey, these are the indicators that we're going to build. Like for basketball, there are various indicators that measures how good this person is in terms of playing that sport. So if I could leave this entire chapter with this one thing as to how you elicited peak performance, is build the racetrack of your team. If you build the racetrack of your team, people will like constantly practice. They'll like get better. The way you build your racetrack is to build performance indicators, output oriented performance indicators. If you build that, and if you measure that, if you celebrate that, then and if you have a leaderboard, and if you like build something like the racetrack, look at the audience that's there. What are they doing? They are watching these cars go around. I find this mindless waste. But there is a lot of deep, there's a lot of things that are going on here. There is a lot of things to learn from here. Each of these players have trained like crazy hard to play this game. And they're constantly pushing the boundaries. Not just the players who are in the driver's seat, but even the machines. Technology is getting better. Like, look at the larger impact of this. The number of people that are getting entertained, like how many seats are being sold. If you build a racetrack and if you get your employees to get and race and practice at that racetrack, everyone, independent of time, they want to work. They want to work to give their best. So elicit peak performance using sports analogy. Build indicators, build the racetrack. Thanks.